Welcome to the third episode of Trophy Grace Project, RASLcast, episode 3. It is Tuesday, February 23rd. As you can see, our guest today, GM of the St. Louis Park Centaurs, Mr. Jon Fischer. Jon, thanks for stepping in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. What we're going to be talking about today, and Carp is certainly an expert on this, are the All Decades team. We are going to reveal the All Decades team for 2000s, obviously for the years 2007, 2008, and 2009, the first three of RASL. Actually, Carp got the back end there of year 2009, stepping in to take over for the awful Brookline Ballsteins franchise. Couldn't have
much maligned.
Much maligned
franchise.
Could not have gotten them out of the league quicker. It's only a shame St. Louis Park wasn't there to start. I think 2009, though, you were probably like fifth sophomore year of college. So
yeah.
You probably
still in college, probably.
Yeah, you probably should have been focusing on your studies. That's probably why.
Well, for sure, 2007 and 8. So
yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, that seems like a slam, but it's really not. I mean, we're talking about like within a year or so. Which is great.
Well,
I mean, and whatever.
A certain other GM happened to go to school for like 11
right.
years. So.
Exactly, not a problem.
He's also a doctor.
You still were in and out. Yeah, I mean, he's got like 12 degrees, but whatever. You were in and out in no time compared to him. It was like 2 decades. Just got a bunch of paper on his wall.
And I got my loan paid off, so who's winning?
Yeah. Well, you know. So like I said, we'll be revealing the All Decades team. I don't think anyone outside of a couple has actually seen those finals. So we'll be talking about that, walking through some of the hits and misses, discussing that, as well as the first and second classes for the RASL Hall of Fame. We'll also be revealing those and discussing that, along with just a little general news sprinkled in, and then obviously our favorite segments, busting some balls early here with Carp, defending himself, and then finishing it off with heating up, and then a little letting him cook. We're going to let Carp cook to close it out. So let's get into it, but first I want to talk about Carp as GM for the St. Louis Park Centaurs. Now, as we mentioned, maligned franchise, Brookline did win the initial Trophy Grace Championship in 2007, did make it to the championship in 2008, but things quickly fell apart thereafter, more so from the owner than the actual franchise. But the franchise was in pretty poor shape when Carp took over in 2009. And so a lot of kind of accolades, a lot of applause needs to be given to him just for digging out of that. But keeping that in mind, Carp is 58-87 for his RASL career, a winning percentage of 40%, which is good for 11th out of the 12 franchises in the history of RASL. So again, not great, but digging out there for a couple of years, pretty rough. Carp has not won the Southeast, now in the Northwest division, but he has not won a conference championship yet, but he does have a title game appearance in 2016. Interestingly enough, as the Splooge Sox that year went from worst to almost first after finishing last in 2015, made it to the championship in 2016. And I think, if I remember, Carp, that was a pretty close championship, wasn't it?
No, it was kind of a blowout, I think.
Okay. Well, that track.
There was some Chicago or Geneva, whichever he was at the time, Rodgers to Nelson double dips in the championship. That probably swung it a lot in his favor. So I was much hoping for some Devontae touchdowns there to lessen that blow, and it did not happen. But
sure. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Probably a little more.
It was just an honor to get there.
Hey, why not? Especially after that bottom finish there in 2015. Also, did finish last in 2011. But important to note here, made the playoffs in 2009, his first season after taking over early into the season. Did manage to steer the franchise to a championship, or to a playoff appearance in 2009, followed it up again in 2010. The first 2 of 6 that the Centaurs have in their franchise history, along with 13, 14, 16, and 18. So obviously recently, the Centaurs have really turned things around as of late, and been a franchise knocking at the door. And the Centaurs do also have the 17th. They did make it into the 350-point club with 359.7 in Week 4 in 2019. That is the 17th highest score in RASL history. So, Carp, I guess first question for you is, have you ever thought of just going back to the Splooge Sox as your nickname, considering you were runner-up that year? And
I've thought of some. I've thought of some name changes. There could be a new identity in the works somewhere here this summer. I don't know. We'll see how much downtime I get. It's definitely something that's crossed my mind of mixing it up, because obviously the Centaurs, half man, half horse, not working out so well.
No. And I forgot to mention, Carp is a 2-time GM of the Year, winning that award in 2010 when he made the playoffs, and then in 2016 when he shepherded the Centaurs to the title game. So he does have that accolade, winning that twice. So I want to make sure we mention that. So what's been your kind of day-to-day here, Carp, in the era of COVID? What's your lifestyle been like?
It's kind of like Groundhog Day. It's the same thing every day. Get up at 6:45 and start working. Work till about 3, maybe take a nap. I purchased a collapsible exercise bike for the winter, so then let's do a little cardio, eat, and then rinse and repeat. So
nice.
Try not to drink too many beers, although that's been a sort of, what's the word I'm thinking of here? It's been a sort of addition to the lifestyle, is going full-blown beer nerd. So
yeah, I mean, I think you gotta have some new hobbies. You absolutely, when you can't really get out of the apartment too much.
In the span of less than a year, my wall has gone from 4 shelves to
whoa.
that. So,
nice.
So
yeah, we'll be talking about your we'll be touching on your dabbling here in the beer sphere a little bit later on in the pod, talking about some of your favorites. I know for me, I since moving out here, I've now filled up the gas tank. We've been here since September, and I've filled up the gas tank 3 times. I just did it. Nice. I just did it Sunday for the first time in about 2.5 months, 3 months. So,
but it's also probably like $4.50 a gallon.
Yeah, I mean, I do it so, I gotta be honest, I do it so infrequently I don't even look. And it's New Jersey, so you I mean, I haven't gotten gas in New York. I've just gotten in New Jersey, where you have to stay in your car. So you can't even get out. So I don't even see the price most of the time. Yeah. So that's been interesting. I mean, obviously I don't drive anywhere. There's nowhere to drive. Everywhere's walkable. I mean, I drive to Target and things like that, but yeah, it's been very interesting. Obviously, most of my conversations, Courtney working a lot, most of my conversations are with the 3-year-old. So, if I start slowly talking to you or using very small words, just know that that's been the crux of my interaction for the last few months. So, well, I'm going to tighten the vice here a little bit, Carp, with our ball buster question, and that is, why do you think you're so bad at drafting wide receivers?
Ooh, I have no idea. I wish I had the answer to that, because I would probably be a lot better.
I mean, what have been your worst?
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say.
Oh no,
go ahead. Give us a little insight on that, and then we'll talk about some of your.
I think I just lock on to someone that I like in college, and then I'm like, no matter what, I'm drafting them, and then they just don't pan out. And for whatever reason, I think sometimes it takes wide receivers a little bit longer to develop than, running backs or anything that are like kind of plug and play. Like I think most running backs can be successful within the first year or two, but wide receivers for some reason seems to take a little bit longer. I mean, even look at Devontae Adams for Green Bay. People said, "Well, cut him," after like his third year in the league, and now he's like essentially one of, if not the best receiver in the league. So
right.
Yeah, for whatever reason, my receivers don't develop, and I think I'll touch on that some later with a couple of some funny things. But yeah, they don't pan out. I seem to be mediocre with quarterbacks and a little bit better with running backs.
Okay, because I was going to ask if you thought you're worse at quarterbacks, but I think we'd be right to say receivers. What have been your favorite misses? Like, what are the ones that now looking back you can say like that was a terrible miss, but I still, it's just fun to know that I missed that.
Well, I'll say a couple of the ones that are my favorites are just moves I didn't even make. Like, for whatever reason, when I used to draft, I just went with a whole list of players and never put them in order of like my preference of what I thought they would be. So I think in the 1 year I had 4 consecutive picks in between the second and third round. I took DeVere Posey when I really, really, really liked T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, whatever, I can get him later because he falls further down this list. And like, if I would have just been like, hey, I like him, I'm going to move him up on my board. Like, and then I would have taken him there. Probably would have had. That was probably before the concept of
before the concept of a board really hit. I was just thinking about that.
Yes.
Like last week about how much my approach to drafting has changed, and looking at like some of the choices I made earlier and like what my rationale was or like what my preparation was, and being like, oh, that's why, because it was so terrible and I didn't.
Yeah.
And
then like the player before that pick was Michael Ektu. Which I was like, well, I need a tight end, so I'm going to take one here. I was like, yep. But another move that I did not make, maybe because I felt pressure from you, was taking who was the kicker from Tampa Bay?
Roberto Aguayo.
Yeah, Roberto Aguayo with the very last pick. All because you had said, well, hey, I took the time to make the nameplate. When I was like, but it's either between him or Tyreek Hill. Big mistake there. And then
could have worked out well.
Amara Darboh from the Seahawks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, granted, I had like 7 or 8 beers by then too, before we went gambling, and everyone was in a hurry to go do that. But yeah, hindsight, I kind of should have been like, well, sorry, you took the time to make the kicker tag.
Yeah, that was only because you spent like the entire month telling everyone that would listen that you were definitely taking Roberto Aguayo in the 5th.
I think I even traded into that pick too, just so I could take him.
Yeah, you did.
Because that was Joel's pick, and I traded.
Yeah, you traded a future 5th. You traded a future 5th. It was like it ended up being like what 42 the next year or something for 50 the year prior. So.
For a guy that was good. 60% on his field goals.
Yeah, well, it happens. It happens that way. That's just how things go. Well, we'll segue out of that into a slightly easier question for you. And obviously, as a connoisseur of the cinematic arts, obviously the highest level of that would be MacGruber, the unrated edition. Yeah, and being that just the level that we break that down to. I want to know what your favorite minor detail is about MacGruber. Something that the group heads, the groupies, can really catch.
Minor details. Definitely the names of MacGruber's team. On the surface, they're really not that funny, but when you have a name like Tanker Lutz and Tug Phelps, Brick Hughes, Vernon Freedom, I mean.
Well, just saying them in order. When you say them in order, too.
Yes.
When you say them in rapid order, then so it makes it even funnier.
I feel like walking around and no one will understand. Tug!
Yeah. Of course not. Ever heard of them? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the only thing that isn't that acceptable in them is, maybe McGruber wasn't as inclusive as he could have or should have been 10 years
True.
ago.
Yeah, and
Just
I
because
was
Vick
actually.
kisses men doesn't mean that you got to leave him off the team.
It doesn't mean he
He
can't
makes
slash and rip
the
throats.
man from exploding.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about that a couple of days ago, and I was wondering if that was like one of those jokes about like a joke that you would see in a typical like stereotypical movie. But then I was like, no, I think I'm maybe just trying to give him too much credit. And like that was a cheap laugh that they got to be like,
maybe Big Show is like, hey, this will be even funnier if I kiss a dude and you don't put me on the team.
I'd like to think that they're making fun of the fact, and I think they are, that like McGruber is a homophobe and they're making fun of that. It just, it still just feels like a really super cheap laugh. And it is unfortunately like long enough ago where it would still be on the tail end where like that would just be, a funny thing. It's like, haha, he's gay. Obviously he can't shoot or be a soldier.
Yeah.
Defend yourself. And this is where we are going to ask Carp to provide some rationale for a terrible trade or a move that was made. So we alluded to having some struggles drafting wide receivers, but I think the one that really stands out the most for a lot of people, because it is a little bit more recent history, would be this. So what we're going to ask you to defend here, Carp, is, and I'll just put it this way, Josh Rosen, how?
Well, at the time, I felt he was the better quarterback out of all of those quarterbacks. They all had their shortcomings in that class.
True.
I can't remember. Did Mayfield start for 2 years or one?
Yeah, he was a 2-year starter.
Okay. I don't know. I didn't like him because he was short and he had the little like gunslinger mentality. Darnold turned the ball over too much. Jackson, I felt like, was way too raw. And Josh Allen, while he had a big arm, was like under 60% completion rate in college. And the one team he did play, Iowa, he had 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So
I mean, Baker.
I felt like Rosen was the most pro-ready. Because he started for 3 years. He was pretty much a traditional pocket passer, although he was, I won't say athletic enough, but if he had to scramble, he could get you 4 or 5 yards. I mean, it was never a threat to run, but I thought he had all the tools. I will also say, this is not in my defense, or maybe it is in my defense, but like, I don't think there's ever been a RASL quarterback that has been railroaded like he has in terms of going into terrible playing situations. Whether it be his rookie year in Arizona, playing behind backup starters the entire year, and then getting traded to a team that just traded all of their offensive linemen. It's really hard for anyone to succeed in that sort of situation. I thought he was going to then be in a decent place with being on Tampa, where that was probably his best situation, is to sit and learn behind Tom Brady. And Tom Brady's going to play for 4 more years. So you can sit back there and learn. Now he's on San Francisco, although I did see I think he signed a non-guaranteed contract with the 49ers. So if Jimmy takes a dump here or breaks another part of his foot or lower half of his body, maybe Rosen gets a chance there. So granted, I will also say he hasn't done a lot with the opportunities he's been given, but I also feel like there's been no other quarterbacks that has had those chances taken away either. So
the first 2 franchises he played for, and especially the situations they're in line-wise, and I think offensive approach could not have been worse for him. So I think you're definitely right there. I won't lie. I mean, I had him as a pretty high prospect. I liked things about him. So I don't think it was egregious. But it just with how quickly that pointed out, now being number 10 pick and being on 4 or 5 teams now already.
Fourth team in 4 years. So
yeah. So I mean, that's a pretty rough go of it. Well, I think I mean, I'll take that defense. I will take that defense. I do think there are some good points you made there. You know, it does help that obviously Allen, I think, went at number 8 or something that year, and ended up being a little bit, you know, Baker now has been a little hit and miss. Darnold obviously has been pretty terrible. Obviously Lamar, you know, was RASL MVP last year. So you know, it's tough, but that was a bit of a gamble to play. So suitable.
Well, and also I think at the time I had a decent quarterback situation where I had Luck, I had Goff, I had Stafford, and I was drafting in the second position. So it was like, I could take a gamble here. I'm still, you know, pretty good. And then Luck retires, Goff regresses.
Yeah.
I will say though, I did make an okay move. It doesn't rectify the choice to take Rosen, but the trade to trade the third pick back to Penton to get Nick Chubb makes it half okay. Because what I was going to do is take Rosen and then either Darnold or Darius Geis, which would have been possibly the worst back-to-back picks.
Yeah, Darius Geis. Like, I don't even want to talk about the Darius Geis choice. I mean,
if he would have not torn his ACL, I would have taken him at 3. There would have been no questions. I wouldn't have traded out. It would have been like a done deal. But
yeah, I let myself get talked out of Jackson Hoyt at number 3. Get talked out of that because we were watching that stupid preseason game and he was struggling, and I thought, maybe I'm not right. It bothers me to this day, but nonetheless, quickly, do you think, like on the scale of being happy with your Nick Chubb pick to the Josh Rosen selection, where do you think Paris Campbell at number 7 in 2019 may land on that scale?
I mean, George Rosen.
Yeah.
If Rosen's 1 and Chubb is 10, Campbell is at like 3 or 4.
Yeah. I mean,
I drafted him with the specific goal of like, hey, I can pair him with Andrew Luck. And then Luck retired 2 weeks later. And Campbell's played in 9 games over 2 years.
Yeah.
Not to mention that I did have Miles Sanders written on the card before I went to turn it in at the draft. Walked halfway up, turned around, crossed it off, and wrote Paris Campbell.
Which, you know, I mean, I'm thankful for it because obviously I'm liking Miles quite a bit, but it probably wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world because then I would have taken AJ Brown with my second round pick, and maybe, I mean, he's all right, but could have worked out all right for everybody. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's early for Paris, coming off an injury in his second year after being
he's certainly better than my second round pick that year of Hakeem Butler.
He's going to be Darren Waller, man. That's what I keep hearing. They're going to put him at tight end. He's going to be Darren Waller. Oh, man.
He's probably not going to be in the league next year.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true. But, hey, what do you know? So, well, let's transition into the all RASL decade teams. Carp, let's start off with the all 2000s. And, again, obviously the, 10 people listening to this podcast are the 10 owners in the league who all know that the league started in 2007. So for the all RASL 2000s decade, we are talking about the first 3 seasons. And quickly, just to talk about, just to get some finalists, let's start out first with the quarterbacks. We'll mention the ballot for the all 2000s decade. Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Tony Romo, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Brett Favre, Jay Cutler, and Donovan McNabb. The first team quarterback was a unanimous vote getter, and that was Drew Brees, and followed by Aaron Rodgers managed to slide in to the superflex position on the first team. tying with Peyton Manning, but the tiebreaker vote did go for Aaron Rodgers, so he slides in at Superflex. And the second team, then Peyton Manning was a unanimous. Both Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers were unanimous vote getters. Brees was unanimous first team, and then the Superflex position for the second team was Tom Brady. So initially, what response do you have to that breakdown, Carp, as far as the quarterbacks are concerned?
Well, seeing as it, was such a small sample size of only 3 years, it did, I wouldn't say make things difficult, but it's a little more cut and dry. I think had Tom Brady not torn his ACL, he would for sure be unanimous, number one. And then Brees would have been, super flex. I think if had that panned out that way, there really wouldn't be much to even argue over. I think it would have been that, cut and dry, easy to figure out. So, I think I agree with pretty much how everything sort of panned out.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, obviously Tom Brady injured in the first game in 2008, had the in 2007 had the sixth best quarterback score of all time in RASL history that season, but he did miss 2008, which equaled out then with Aaron Rodgers, who didn't play in 2007, obviously still on the bench there behind Brett Favre in 2008. Rodgers did finish as QB4 in 2008, and then was the QB1 in 2009. And in that 2009 season, Rodgers did put up the 19th best quarterback score of all time. Drew Brees, as far as his resume, Brees was a top 5 QB in all 3 seasons. He is the only finalist to make that designation. Manning and was 4th, 6th, and 4th. And interestingly enough, Brady in 2009 finished at number 6, which I think is probably what, in the season back from the injury, probably what cost him, legitimately for that second team's quarterback slot, so the super flex. Tony Romo actually was the only other finalist to finish in the top 5, the QB position twice. He was QB2, QB9, and QB5 throughout the 2000s decade for RASL. He actually, as far as an average, outscored Manning. Peyton Manning was at 37.8 for the decade, Romo at 40.2, Brees 41.7, Rodgers 42.2, and Brady 45.8. So I think I agree. No real issues I would take with that. I think slotting Rodgers, even though he didn't play one of the years, versus Manning played all 3. Manning 4.64, that's nice, but putting up a number 1 and a number 4 in your first 2 years, I think I agree with that. So definitely no issues there for me. I was surprised, like I said, for you, I think it was pretty cut and dry that there were just 4 finalists for this. I mean, Romo had a really good case, but that 4-man group, if you were to just tell people without even looking at the stats, and especially for RASL, who are the best 4 quarterbacks, the tail end of the 2000s, I think those are the 4 names that come up. So
I think not enough people would remember, or people would be surprised, I think, to hear Rodgers was number 1 overall in 2009, because that was the year before the Super Bowl year.
Right.
I think he was a little more, I wouldn't say loosey-goosey with the football, but I don't remember his exact interceptions that year, but that was probably the second highest in his career, I would say. I mean, 2008 for sure, when it was his first year starting, but my visions of that year are just him having to, the playoff game against Arizona, having to literally try and do everything as his defense just breaks.
Right. Yeah. That was the first big year for him. I mean, like I mentioned, the 19th highest overall, but Rodgers, the next couple of seasons, went off. He has the 4th highest ever in 2011. We'll talk about that in the next decade, but it really was a jumping off point for him. And like I said, I don't think that necessarily people would have picked that. It seems like he's been playing for such a long time. So maybe someone does say Romo instead of Rodgers, forgetting he was that good for those 2 years that he actually started. But yeah, I think Romo does get a shout out there just for kind of what he brought. I think those are really the only 5. We provided 8 finalists, but in reality, there's only 5 in competition for that. So moving on to the running backs, and again, we'll just kind of talk about the finalists. We had 10 here. That's Adrian Peterson, Frank Gore, Chris Johnson, Brian Westbrook, Clinton Portis, Thomas Jones, Matt Forte, Maurice Jones-Drew, Steven Jackson, and LaDainian Tomlinson. Adrian Peterson was a unanimous first-team running back. I don't think anyone's surprised there, although, again, coming in as a rookie in the first season, pretty impressive for his first 3 seasons. The second running back on the first team was Chris Johnson. Johnson was not a unanimous vote getter, left off of a ballot, but he is running back 2 on the first team. And then the second team consisted of Brian Westbrook and Frank Gore slotting in. Matt Forte just off the pace, 1 point behind for the second team running back. So what say you about that grouping, Carp, in terms of first and second team and who didn't make it?
Again, there's really, I don't have any discrepancies with how things shook out. I mean, maybe you could say Chris Johnson only played 2 years, but they were 2 of the 3 years were really, really good.
Right.
So that's, the reasoning why he's first team, and I don't have any issues with that.
Yeah, to your point, his 2009 season is the second highest scoring season for any running back ever in RASL.
Well, that was when he went over 2,000, right?
Right. 820. Put it this way: 822.4 points. That is 94 points more than Arian Foster at number 3, and only 4 points behind Christian McCaffrey in 2019.
And that's
absolutely
double what a good running back score for a year would be, kind of.
Right. He averaged 51.4 points per game in 2009.
Yeah, if your running back got you 25 points, you'd be like, hey, that's pretty good. That's a starting
and to your point,
back.
Yeah, and to your point, in his rookie season in 2008, he was running back 9. So he only played those 2 years, but he was top 10 for both teams.
Yep. It is interesting to see that Frank Gore got a first team vote.
Yeah, that I will say that
he's been consistent. I'll give him that, but he's kind of one. I'll give him. He's a step above. I did write down about Thomas Jones, like a guy that was just like, was he ever really that good? I mean, I looked and he had 5 years. Only 5 years of his 11-year career, he had 4+ yards per carry on average.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a volume guy. That's not really
the stat. Yeah.
Yeah, but
yeah, I found that.
You to know. It will shock you to know, though, in 2008 he was running back 6, and in 2009 he was running back 7. So he's one of 7 backs. He's one of 7 backs out of the 10 that was a top 10 running back in 2 seasons. But to your point, I mean, not particularly great for either of those. Just
he was never a guy in one of your other leagues you would draft as the first or second or even third.
This is still the period of time where people are running backs are getting 30 carries a game, and Thomas Jones is always getting 30. But,
yeah, true, very true. Yeah,
right. Frank Gore. To your point, started out 2007 was running back 8, running back 15 in 2000, second year in 2008, and then was up to running back 5 for 2009. So I guess maybe a consistency vote there. Never being outside the top 15, I don't know. But
Miami Hurricane fan.
It was very much clear.
Or maybe someone who's a fan of people rebounding from ACL tears. I don't know.
Someone that's really about the human spirit, embodying the human spirit and what it can do when it's pushed. I mean, to your point, though,
say,
it's clear. It's just the top two. It's Peterson and Johnson. I mean, they're in their own class.
Yep.
Peterson was 3, 3, and 4, running back 3, 3, and 4. It's amazing to me that he wasn't above running back 3 in any of those years. That's really the only shocker. But I think that those two are clearly 1 and 2. I have a lot of issues with how the voting went for the second team. If there's anything you want to point out before we move on to that. For me,
2009, I will say, was an interesting year just with the small sample size. It was like, it's the year that the legends fell off a cliff. Like, Tomlinson went to number 26, Westbrook went to 52, and Portis went to 58 overall. Like, the guys that carried you through the 2000s, all of a sudden, all just hit a wall in the same year.
Well, to your point, when you look at that, because if you look at that 3-year grid, those three are like at 8, 9, and 10. And in 2007 and 2008, they're both green because all 3 of them are top 10 running backs. And then, like you said, then it goes, and it's not like, oh, they went to like 15 or 18 or like 19. It's 26, and then obviously Portis and Westbrook are hurt, but they were clearly done at that point. And I think that's part of. I know for Westbrook, I would have loved to maybe try to throw him a vote there, considering he was running back 1 in 2007 and running back 10 the second year. But you just can't. You can't with that situation.
I mean, even if Westbrook would have stayed at like 12-ish that last year, then for sure first team. But
right. And for me, I mean, I wanted to see a little more Matt Forte love. I think is it's just where I'm at. I mean, he again, someone that wasn't the first year because he was a rookie in 2008, but running back 4 that year, and then running back 11, which I guess is a little bit low, but still, I just thought maybe he should get a little shout out there. Why don't we move on to the wide receivers? We'll touch on those quickly for the team. First of all, the finalists for the All 2000s team at wide receiver: Randy Moss, Reggie Wayne, Larry Fitzgerald, Brandon Marshall, Wes Welker, Roddy White, Andre Johnson, and Steve Smith. Randy Moss, not a surprise there, unanimous vote getter to make all first team. RASL 2000s, Larry Fitzgerald, he was a unanimous ballot on all ballots. He comes in at wide receiver 2. Second team, Andre Johnson was not on all of the ballots, and he slots in as the first receiver for wide receiver for the second team, along with Reggie Wayne, who also made on the majority of the ballots, but missed. Brandon Marshall, the next closest, just missing the cut there, and along with additional vote getters, Wes Welker and Roddy White. So takeaways from that, Carp, as far as who's on the teams and who received votes.
The first team I have no gripes with. I think that was pretty, once again, cut and dry. It's hard to dispute any of that. I could see how the second team was sort of interchangeable with the way things went there. I'm trying to find what I did with these stats.
I know for me, I think it is pretty, like you said, cut and dry. For while you're looking that up, I'll just drop in that I find it pretty egregious that Andre Johnson. I like, obviously, Larry Fitzgerald was Larry Fitzgerald owner, all about Larry Fitzgerald. I did find it to be pretty surprising to me that Larry Fitzgerald made it in over Andre Johnson. I know Andre Johnson finished 23rd in 2007 when he was hurt and only played 6 games, but he was the wide receiver 1 in 2008 and 2009.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. I don't. It seems like this is the most egregious error to me so far. I don't understand how the guy that's the wide receiver 1 in 2 consecutive seasons out of only 3 in the decade that we had, doesn't make it.
Speaking of that, I don't think, because it was over 10 years ago now, I don't know if people remember he was hurt. I mean, they just see a 23 next to it, and they're like, oh, maybe he was a rookie or something like that, or it hadn't developed yet. But
I mean, he, just to put that into perspective too, as the wide receiver one those years, that's the 17th and the 24th highest wide receiver seasons of all time. The only one from this decade that's above that is obviously Randy Moss at number 4. And then Larry Fitzgerald is at number 30. Other than that, Reggie Wayne at 32, and then nobody else within the 2000s decade in the top 50.
Yeah, I think the fact that he was left off of 2 ballots was also like just completely
How can you possibly not have him on a ballot? How can you look at him finishing first twice and say, I'm not even going to put him on the second team? We need to go back and look at the voting, and a couple people need to, I don't know, go before Congress or something. This is insane to me. So you could look at that and come away with that.
12 hours of Senate hearings.
Whatever. I mean, he gets on second team, which is terrible. At least it's Larry Fitzgerald, who obviously I'm going to stand for big time. And I think Reggie Wayne was the right choice as well. That's why I voted for second team. It's hard, but I will be honest, I actually had Marshall in my super flex for the second team because I thought he was so good that he should get some recognition. He was wide receiver 7, wide receiver 8, and wide receiver 7 for the decade. So one of only 2 people to finish in the top 10. Wes Welker the other, but Wes Welker's stats are empty calories. Come at me, Dave. You know they are. He'd bust one for 80 yards and then have 14 catches for 23 yards.
Danny Amendola on steroids.
Well, I think he was on steroids. I think that's part of the reason why he had all the concussions or something. I don't know. All those little guys were on it, but so I think Marshall needed a special shout out there. But takeaways for that. Any further touches on the wide receiver position?
I don't think so.
Okay. And now we're going to go to tight end. Talk about the tight end position. That was Tony Gonzalez, Jason Witten, Dallas Clark, and Antonio Gates. Some heavy hitters there. I don't know if this one drives me. This one might push the Andre Johnson second teamer, or Andre Johnson not showing up on 2 votes. Tony Gonzalez as the first team tight end, not surprising. Tony Gonzalez was not a unanimous, and I don't even say he wasn't a unanimous first teamer. He wasn't on all of the ballots. I don't know where to go from there. Tony Gonzalez, just to keep it in mind here, wide receiver, tight end 1, tight end 1, tight end 7, average for tight end 3 for the decade. Average 22.4 points per game, more than a point ahead of anyone else in the field. But he was not even a unanimous ballot getter, but he did make first team. Jason Witten was on all the ballots. He makes the second team. Jason did get 1 first team vote, and then the rest were second teamers, but he was on all of the ballots. And then inexplicably, Dallas Clark receiving a vote. To me, this was clear. It's Gonzalez and then Witten. There shouldn't have been any sort of issue. Everyone's votes should have been the same. Witten was 2, 2, and 5 for the 3 years. Yes, Dallas Clark was pretty good, 6, 3, and 1. But keep in mind that this is the tight end position where being a number 6 tight end is nice, but we're really only talking about So I mean, I get it. In any other situation, he could maybe get a little bit of burn, but I don't know. I should probably.
Tony Gonzalez clearly did something to someone that was voting while he was in River Falls practicing with the Chiefs.
Something
happened behind the scenes.
Happened, right? It had to have been. And
Tony dragged said person to his dorm room.
Yeah. Use the doll. Well, the less we talk about that terrible decision, the better. Why don't we just briefly touch on kicker? Whatever. Stephen Gronkowski, unanimous choice. Not unanimous first teamer, but he was unanimous on all the ballots. He is the first team kicker for all 2000s. Mason Crosby ends up as the second teamer. And then the Packers defense is the first team. Vikings were on all of the ballots as the second teamer. I can't imagine for the life of me why the Packers wouldn't have also been on all of the ballots. It's almost like there was a giant Vikings fan voting who wouldn't give them any credit. But neither here nor there. I'm not going to say that there's anomalies in the voting system, but I don't really think
I certainly see a pattern as well.
I don't think we need to spend any time dissecting the kickers or the defenses, other than the fact that the Cardinals receiving a vote was also a terrible vote, but we already kind of alluded to that. So
why not just vote for the Bengals? I mean, come on. If you're gonna throw away a vote, throw away a vote.
So we're gonna stand off here in a little bit of a Mortal Kombat style. If audio is working, we would have a pretty sweet Mortal Kombat drop right here for first round fight. But we're gonna have a standoff. On this side, I am going to be supporting the case for Reggie Wayne, which I have throughout, as a second team vote getter. And I know, Carp, I think we actually had a dialogue about this. You were pretty adamantly against Reggie Wayne. So maybe you want to provide your synopsis for why Reggie Wayne is such a terrible choice.
I'm looking for it.
It's good. I got to tell you this, looking at stats, it can't be stat-based.
Terrible choice.
It can't be stat-based.
I mean, this was so long ago, like the voting.
I mean, you're not 80.
I think it was like...
Yeah, it was like a year ago.
It had to be, he had a higher, like, weekly average. Like,
yeah.
That might have been it.
Yeah,
because that was probably it, because I looked at like the Excel spreadsheet and was like, hey, there's more tabs on the bottom than just this weekly or the numbers that they placed. So legitimately, that's probably the only reason why. So
there's a fair amount of data in there that can obviously get lost for sure. But I guess for me, and the big thing, and I've already touched on it, so we don't need to dive into too much more, but Wayne, with 2 top 5 finishes, that's the big reason for me. Wide receiver 2, wide receiver 5, sandwich around a wide receiver 12. He actually had the best average finish of any of the wide receiver finalists for the decade, tied with Moss. He was 4th in average points per season, and 5th in average points per game for the decade. So that was the big rationale for me over Wes Welker, I believe, was maybe who I think you might have been pushing for at the time, which I get. I just don't really like Wes Welker. It has nothing to do with like making that trade and then having Wes Welker not on my team when I could have won another title with Wes Welker. With all those empty calorie catches of his, but yeah, that'll come up later for sure. Steven Jackson is another one. This is round 2, so I think I had the flawless victory there in round 1. I could, certainly not a supporter of Steven Jackson for all 2000 second team running back. I know you were in support. I know going back into your headspace at the time, it's tough. Maybe you just like them because of the cool visor and the dreadlocks.
Running back average, he had the 4th highest average, so I justified that as that's good enough for the second team. So
that's true. Yeah.
Really not more than, and he was tied with someone, I think, too.
Yeah.
Or
if you take out
just below Westbrook. So that was my reasoning on that one. So
yeah, if you just factor in the games he played, 34.6 was the fourth highest weekly score for him. So I do agree that is a pretty that's a pretty high number. So I can get that. I don't think it's a terrible choice. He did have a fair amount of injuries there in the first season, 2007. If you take that out and you just go based on the seasons with 10 plus games, he did average 478 points per season, which would have been tied with Maurice Jones-Drew for sixth. I just thought even in the healthy season at 12 and then his best season being 6, his best season was tied with Thomas Jones and was lower than Peterson, Johnson, Forte, even Frank Gore, Mojo. Portis had 2 times above him. So I guess that was it for me. But now that you're mentioning with the fourth best average per week for the 3 years, I can see that maybe for consistency, if not ever having a peak season. So.
Funny quips that I'd like to add. The one-hit wonders for the overall for every season. People that would be kind of shocking that you're like, what the hell? So 2007 one-hit wonders, it was a tie between Derek Anderson. Actually, Derek Anderson's the lead. He gets
breakout player of the year in 2007.
Highest score. Second place in that one, John Kitna at number 21 overall. 2008, Steve Slayton, number 14 overall. And in 2009, Jason Campbell, number 20, and Kyle Orton coming in right behind him at 21.
Yeah, that's pretty great. I mean, there's some fun names for sure. I know going back with all the data that we have, and I know I shared that Motherload with you, so you got all the names. It's fun seeing some of those at the top, especially now in 2021. Now that we're 15 years, going on 15 years from the original season, and seeing some of those names up at the top of the list, or even names in the middle. I know when you get to the middle and you're like borderline like wide receiver 3 starters, and you're looking at some of those names and seeing some of the old favorites pop up. Yeah, Austin Collie. Like, how many games can I get before he inevitably has another concussion? Always waiting for it. Well, I think let's move into the 2010s here, Carp, and talk about the 2010s decade team. We'll rip through this one here pretty quickly. So the finalists at quarterback, not so surprising based on the names that we had. 3 out of the 4 quarterbacks that slotted on the all-decade 2000s team show up here within the 10. That's Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, and Tom Brady. Repeat as finalists for the all 2010s team. Joining them then are Russell Wilson, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, Matt Stafford, and Phillip Rivers within the 10. And replicating his 2010s all-decade unanimous first-team choice, Drew Brees again is the unanimous first-team choice for the all 2010s decade. So not surprising. The only person in RASL to be unanimous first team for both decades. He slots in as the quarterback on the first team, and due to some quirks that we will talk about in a little bit, the superflex position is actually not a quarterback on this team. So we'll talk about why here in a little bit. But the second team quarterback for the all 2010 decade was Aaron Rodgers. He slots in at QB 1 on the second team. And then Tom Brady is the super flex for the second team. Weirdly, based on those names we read and the dominance for the decade, 7 quarterbacks received votes. Carp for the all 2010s team. I think we will single out a couple of those. One specifically as maybe being the worst vote of any of the all decades that we've probably maybe ever had. Definitely way up there. But 7 of the 10 finalists actually received a vote. What do you think about the first team? Specifically, only one quarterback making that team.
If you look at the overall stats, it does make sense because the super flexive Calvin Johnson put up insane amount of points at the early part of the 2010s. So, sure. I mean, it makes sense. Although since we are a QB heavy league, it does look a little skewed that way. But
and I think you're right. Based on dominance, there are 3 receivers that 100% should have been first team. So I'm not disagreeing with that. I just think it's interesting looking at it. But I totally agree that the super flex for the first team based on this decade should have been a wide receiver, and it should have been Calvin Johnson.
I think had the vote happened this year, then because of what Rodgers did this year, that would probably weigh on people's mind and move him like higher, even though it's not even the 2010s.
Right.
But yeah, I once again really no complaints or disagreements.
And I mean, just to go through this now, obviously the tail end of the decade not so great for Brees. 2017, 18, 19, he was QB 11, QB 8, and QB 23, so not great. Obviously, 2019 missed a couple of games with injury. So he comes out of 2009, 2010, he's QB 6. Then he rips off 6 consecutive years of top 5 quarterback play. 1, 1, 2, 5, 3, and 3. So that alone right there, he is the only quarterback to finish in the top 5 6 times. There are a couple other quarterbacks that made it that popped in there a few times. Rodgers and Brady, the other 2 quarterbacks that made the 2 all RASL 2010s decade, were 5 times each. Rodgers went, and you talked about that in 8 and 9, how that 9 was kind of his big season. And he parlayed that into 3-2, QB2, 3, QB2, and QB3 in 2010, 11, and 12. Right after that, before that season, he got hurt, bounced back to QB2, 9 and 1, and then ended the decade with 7 and 9. So, and that's why Rodgers ended up at QB2 on the second team. And then Brady at the super flex there started off the decade hot as well. 3 top 5 finishes, 5, 3, and 2. And then had sprinkled in a QB2 in 2015 and a QB3 in 2017. The others receiving votes, as I mentioned, were Russell Wilson, who I think was a legitimate candidate for that super flex spot on the second team. In my eyes, there were 5, maybe 6 quarterbacks that could theoretically receive both, 4 that were viable. But Wilson did receive a lot of second team votes. And then inexplicably, Fat Ben not only, before we talk about Fat Ben, not only receiving a vote, but a first team vote. A first team vote. Before we talk about that, let's just mention Russell Wilson. Obviously didn't play the first 2 years. He was a 2012 draft pick, and he started out as QB 13, QB 8, but then he went 3 and 4, 11, 1, 9, and 4. So he actually had 4 top 5 finishes while only playing in 8 seasons. Fat Ben had 2 top 5 finishes, and he had 7 out of the 10 seasons outside of QB 10. Yet received a first team vote. So probably the worst vote, like I said, that's been received. Matt Ryan also received a vote, and then Cam Newton.
He was an MVP.
Yeah, Cam Newton did have 4 seasons in the top 5. So while only playing 8 seasons overall, so half of his seasons of the decade were top 5 finishes. including QB1 in 2015 when he was RASL MVP. Right. Anything further you want to add in on the QBs, Carp?
Don't think so.
All right, let's move on to running backs. Finalists there were LaShawn McCoy, Matt Forte, Arian Foster, Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, Marshawn Lynch, Todd Gurley, and DeMarco Murray. This is easily, out of the 2 all-decades teams and out of all the position groupings, the closest that any of the groups had. Just to put it into context, every single one of the 10 finalists received a vote to either the first or the second team. In fact, every single finalist, 9 out of the 10 received at least 2. Only one of the 10 finalists received 1 vote, and that was the first team. So very close, very hard to kind of differentiate between these, which I think we'd both agree with. Really tough to kind of suss that out. A lot of good depth for the decade. And it ends up being first team LaShawn McCoy and Arian Foster. Second team Le'Veon Bell and Ezekiel Elliott. Matt Forte just missing the cut there, followed by Adrian Peterson with a first team vote, Todd Gurley with 5 second team votes, and then Marshawn Lynch, Jamal Charles, and DeMarco Murray rounding that out. So again, McCoy and Foster first team, and Bell and Elliott on the second team. What do you think about that foursome as far as for the 2 teams are concerned, Carp, and also how they slot in on first and second team?
Let's see. First team, I definitely have to agree with. I was a big proponent of LaShawn McCoy simply because he's one of the 2 guys that actually played the entire decade. And not only that, he was productive in pretty much, 8 out of the 10 years of the decade. So right. I think that to me was a no-brainer, and I thought I was really going to have to really vouch for him.
He was a vote
surprisingly
short of being unanimous.
Yeah. I thought before the voting, I was going to have to be like, you guys don't be idiots. This is really good. Fortunately, people saw it that way. So, and then Arian Foster, I mean, for the years he was healthy, was pretty dominant. Even going back to using or in other leagues, he would pretty much be first or second QB running back taken. So I can easily see how he would be first team.
I think the thing too with running backs is having to take into account longevity isn't as much of an issue. I think for me, and this is probably what you're going to mention too, is it's the higher end. How many high end, top 5, top 8, top 10 type seasons did you have? And that's really what we're talking about. It's not like a Frank Gore where you're running back, 15 basically. Frank Gore averaged finish of 19.7. He never was below running back outside of the last 2 years when he was hurt in 18 and 19 or when he didn't play as much. He was never below running back 16, but he was never above running back 11. So
There's one thing that made the Excel spreadsheet made evident is the 5-year shelf life of running backs.
Right. Yeah.
You've basically got 5 to 6 years maybe, or they're going to be super productive, and then it's going to just tail off.
Yeah. Well, and I thought it was interesting too. Obviously, a big point of contention was, as I think for Ezekiel Elliott was only playing the last 4 years of the decade, right? Versus somebody like I think Matt Forte, who played 8 out of the 10 years, right? Well, the 4 years that Elliott played were all top 10 running backs. And outside of 2017, when he was running back 10, the other 3 were top 4. So, I saw that. For me, I thought Forte having 5 top 10 finishes and 7 top 20 out of the 8 seasons he played, for me personally, was why I put him in the second team over Elliott, although I totally understood the case for Elliott with it being, 4 high-end seasons. If it had been a fifth, it would have been a slam dunk for me. I just really wanted Matt Forte to get some love, as I mentioned, in the 2000s decade, and that that didn't quite happen. But I can't really argue with anyone that picked any of these running backs at any point. I thought, to your point, McCoy and Foster are the clear first teamers. And then I had Forte over Elliott on the second team with Bell. But, you know, Le'Veon had top three finishes when he was, you know, absolutely dominant around the season he sat out in the injury season. So it's tough to argue there.
I think my, not gripe, but in defense of not giving Matt Forte love, is he had good finishes place-wise, but, like, none of his seasons were really that, like, spectacular and fantastic. I mean, his highest season was 17th in total points, and his best for running backs was the 24th best average ever. So
yeah, right, yeah,
good, not great. Which I think it's not a knock, but
yeah. 2013 was the 22nd best running back season. 2014 was the 24th, and then he shows up again at 41. So he did have 3 seasons in the top. But 41 was actually 2008. So 2 of those seasons were top 50 seasons. But yeah, not through the roof as far as those numbers are concerned. But yeah, like I said, I was just looking at that. Just somebody I really liked. I guess the tiebreaker for me out of the 2 was very much enjoying Matt Forte.
He was certainly in consideration, obviously, for me.
And I thought a case like Jamal Charles, like, that's a really difficult one too, right? I think he actually got 2 first-team votes, which makes sense when you look at the fact that he had, 3 top 5 seasons. He was running back 2 twice, running back 8. And those are his 4 years, but then it was 4 seasons where he didn't play more than 6 games, with injuries. So. Just a lot of interesting things there. Marshawn Lynch, I would have never. I knew he was good, but it's hard. 2011 to 2014, remembering that he was running back 6, 4, 5, and 4. I would have never. I knew he was good, but I would have never picked him to be that high. So interesting piece there. So for the wide receivers, finalists were Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Calvin Johnson, Odell Beckham, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Mike Evans, Brandon Marshall, Demaryius Thomas, and Amari Cooper. First team, unanimous on all ballots, not unanimous first teamer, but showing up on all the ballots was Julio Jones, sliding at wide receiver 1. Second most points was Antonio Brown, who only showed up on 8 ballots, which is something we'll talk about here in a minute. Maybe the most slam dunk of any of them for any position. And then, as you mentioned, Superflex, Calvin Johnson, who did show up on all 10 ballots, slots in at Superflex. So 3 receivers on the first team. That means the 4th highest vote getter was DeAndre Hopkins, who slots as wide receiver 1 on the second team. And then, because of the kind of consolidation of votes all within those 4 wide receivers, with Hopkins showing up on 9 ballots, Johnson on 10, Brown on 8, and Jones on 10. There weren't a lot of votes to go around, and Odell Beckham actually then makes it to the second team, wide receiver 2. Mike Evans and AJ Green also received votes.
I was giggling at the votes, because if it had just been flipped one place, it would be Green Beckham, and then I would get really excited because Dorial Green Beckham made it. He didn't.
Oh, another wide receiver.
Yet another failed wide receiver draft pick.
Yeah. Well, see, and you mentioned this, and I think it was clear. I mean, it's very clear to me that there were 3 wide receivers that absolutely dominated, and that was Brown, Jones, and Johnson.
Yep.
No question asked. Obviously, Johnson did not play the last. Yeah, Johnson did not play the last 4 years. I thought it was interesting. I would have never guessed this. I mean, I knew there were some issues. I never would have guessed that Calvin Johnson was wide receiver 15 and wide receiver 13 his last 2 years in the league.
He missed a bunch of games, almost half. I think one of those. Really?
No, he was healthy for those 2 seasons. He might have been banged up, but he did not play less than he missed. He didn't miss more than one game in either of those 2 seasons. Shockingly enough, because I don't see it showing up in red on the spreadsheet. But in the first 4 seasons was wide receiver 8, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 1, and wide receiver 2.
He missed. All right, I'm checking it now. He missed 2 games in 2013 and 3 in 2014. So still, it's like, still ended up with over 1,000 yards receiving and 12 touchdowns and 8 touchdowns. So
So, I mean, for Julio, obviously didn't play the first season in 2010, then was 17-11, was hurt in 13, where he's wide receiver 58, and then ripped off 6 consecutive seasons of wide receiver 4 or better, which is phenomenal. Antonio Brown, first 3 seasons, obviously his rookie year in 2010, very minimal playing time. Then he finished wide receiver 20, wide receiver 38, and then ripped off 6 consecutive seasons, wide receiver 7 or better, including finishing wide receiver 1 3 times. The only wide receiver of all of these to finish 3 times, and only 2 wide receivers, he and Calvin Johnson, finished wide receiver 1 more than once. And keep in mind, that is the Antonio Brown who did not show up on 2 ballots for, I forget, for humanitarian reasons or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the guy, but stats are stats. It's hard to turn a blind eye on those.
Wide receiver 1 3 times, and including in 2015 putting up the highest score of wide receiver ever, 647 points, and the 5th highest season, the season before that, with 604 points, and the 18th highest season in 2017 with 532. So Antonio he has 2 of the top 5 seasons of all time in this decade, and has 6 of the top 50, or 5 of the top 50 from the decade. Again, not showing up on those ballots. I can't point that out enough. So I think we've definitely run that piece of it into the ground enough. What did you think about who made the second team? I know you're not a fan of one of the slots for the second team wide
receiver. I wouldn't say not a fan of Odell Beckham. It's just he had a smaller sample size. Granted, he started out his rookie season, or those first 3 years or 4 years, whatever they were phenomenal. But he's definitely tailed off towards the end. So that was kind of my knock on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, in the lens of like the absolute best wide receivers, probably. It's funny to think though that like his tailing off was 2018 wide receiver 15 and 2019 wide receiver 25, which I do agree is tailing off when your first 3 seasons are wide receiver 6 in 13 games, wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 1. So yeah, it is.
Remember when Joel redshirted him?
Yeah.
Can we talk about the most boneheaded roster decision ever?
You mean redshirting a guy when he finishes with 41 points per game as a rookie? Is that something that's bad? Is that bad?
And he didn't redshirt, or no, he kept a Cody Latimer act.
Yeah. Is that bad? 41 points per game? I don't think he could have used it for sure. Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow there, for sure. But yeah. I know that he, for me, and I think one of the reasons I was on board with that is 2015 was the 16th best score ever. Obviously 2014 as a rookie, 40.6. That is the highest. Just to reiterate, he only played 13 games that season. That season is the highest weekly point per game of any wide receiver ever in RASL history. 40.6. At best, Antonio Brown's 40.4 in 2015, and Josh Gordon's 39.8 in 2013. 40.6 points per game. So for me, it was that season being obviously through the roof, being a wide receiver 1 and only having 1 season out of 6 where he was outside the top 25 when he was hurt. I do think Hopkins obviously is a great choice there too, and I had him in there as well. But I think the Mike Evans vote was obviously egregious homerism. I don't, I have no problem calling this individual out. It is terrible homerism. But, it is defensible. I mean, I will say it is, I guess, I don't know. He never, he was a rookie in 2014. He never finished below wide receiver 20 in 6 seasons, but he only had 2 top 10 seasons. So, which, I mean, what do you think's a better vote, AJ Green or Mike Evans? I would say AJ Green.
AJ Green.
Yeah. That's the one that I would not, and I think and I said I don't think that's a bad vote. I think it's defensible. I just don't know what the other 4 wide receivers, and obviously that's probably because you're not voting Antonio Brown for morality's sake. So I'd consider him to be fringe, maybe. But Mike Evans is just a homerism pick, and there's no way to defend it.
Yeah. Does that apply to the tight ends next?
Why don't you mention the tight ends? Why don't you walk us through the tight ends who ended up were the finalists?
Well, the first team was Rob Gronkowski, and the second team tight end was Travis Kelce. Rob Gronkowski receiving 9 out of 10 first place votes.
I was going to say, it's interesting. You mentioned Rob Gronkowski and immediately say unanimous first team or unanimous vote getter. Interesting. 9 votes.
Yeah.
Well, that's strange.
In the decade, he finished as the top scoring tight end 4 times.
But Carp, who could have possibly received a vote then if Rob Gronkowski didn't receive one?
Someone who watches the show Catching Kelce. Probably the only person in our league who has ever seen an episode of that show.
You know what's funny? That's not actually who. That's not actually. I'm not reviewing the voters, but that's not actually who voted for him. Now, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if they left it off, but I do know the first team vote for Travis Kelce was not a homerism pick.
I stand corrected then.
But that person may have left Rob Gronkowski off of his ballot. Yeah. It's hard to explain that one. Like you mentioned, Rob Gronkowski 4 times. He tight end 1. I mean, that's all you have to say. I mean, Kelce finished wide receiver or tight end 1 3 times. Witten did it twice. But there's just no reason that Gronk's not on there. Gronk, as you mentioned, Gronk for the decade has the number 1, the number 9, the number 12, and the number 22 all-time highest seasons for the tight end. He has the number 2 for most points per game, only bested the number 2, the number 7, and the number 8 in points per game for seasons, only bested by Travis Kelce's amazing season this year. I just there's really not a whole lot to say there other than what you
just
mentioned.
in a football landscape, like he's the best tight end that has ever played in the NFL. It's hard to believe that someone would not think that or recognize that.
Yeah. Now,
for a fantasy football league.
He did make it on all the ballots, but how you could not pick him first, I do not know. But I do want to say we piled on the homerism pick pretty heavy for the wide receiver, but I want to absolve him of any guilt for this particular choice. That was not him.
And I will do the same.
And then just to round it out, and then we're not obviously going to dive too much into this. Kickers, Justin Tucker, he was on all 10 ballots, first team. Stephen Gostkowski on all 10 ballots for the second team. Although Stephen did get 1 first team vote, so it kept Justin from being a unanimous first teamer, but they both were on all 10. Will Lutz also received a vote. And then for defense, the Ravens showed up on all 10 ballots, and they are the first team all 2010 decade defense. Seahawks, come in.
I still think Seahawks should have been number one.
Fair. Give me
why they got five
explanation.
First team picks and then 2 second team picks, so 3 people didn't even vote for them.
All right.
Just
well,
in a football,
like,
not even fantasy football, but like they played in a tougher division for longer. The Ravens had to play the Bengals twice and the Browns twice every year. So that's 4 games.
They had the same amount of top 5 finishes. So
I also just want to draw the point of them Seahawks scoring 77 points in the playoffs against you.
I
still remember that game. Like you're checking the stats in the parking lot at Lambeau, and you're just like, Jesus Christ. Because it was like the Cardinals had like 60 yards of offense. Like Seattle had like 5 sacks, 2 defensive touchdowns, like 5 turnovers.
I think I've had 2 times in a playoff where a defense has put up like more than 30 on me.
I just feel like the Seahawks were the better choice. But anyway,
that's fair. All right. Well, let's transition in. We'll spend a little bit of time. There's not as much here to talk about when it comes to the Hall of Fame classes here. So we'll talk about the 2019 class first, Carp. 2019, that was the first year. So to keep in mind, this was anyone that retired in previous or in the 2016 season. So the ballot for the 2019 RASL Hall of Fame class included, and this to make it onto the ballot, I think is the first thing. We've talked about this before, but just to note it again, you can secure a place on the ballot by either being winning one RASL MVP award, winning one All RASL team, plus having another top 8 quarterback season, a top 10 running back or wide receiver, or a top 4 tight end position, 4+ years finishing at that position or higher, or finishing at that number or higher for your position, or being the rookie of the year or playoff MVP along with 2 more top 10 finishes. So that's where you'll see some of the more interesting names on the ballot, just like the regular Hall of Fame. So anyway, the ballot then, keeping that in mind, included Kurt Warner, LaDainian Tomlinson, Michael Turner, Thomas Jones, Quentin Portis, Brian Westbrook, Joseph Adai, Peyton Hillis, Terrell Owens, Marcus Golston. I don't know why I wanted to say Marquise so bad. Greg Jennings. Those all failed to meet the threshold of 30% to stay on the ballot, not surprisingly.
Peyton Hillis.
Hey, he was all RASL first team 1 year. So they all were dropped off the ballot. Remaining on the ballot for the next year, receiving the 30% or higher threshold were Maurice Jones-Drew, Randy Moss, Reggie Wayne, Wes Welker, and Dallas Clark. And the 2019 Hall of Fame class, all unanimous, not surprising, Peyton Manning, Calvin Johnson, and Tony Gonzalez. So I don't think any surprises there, obviously, with how much Peyton Manning dominated throughout his career. Obviously, a little bit rougher towards the tail end, but not surprising. Anything specific or that you want to talk about with those 3, Carp? I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, obviously.
No, I think we kind of touched on it earlier, too.
Yeah. The only thing I'd mention is it's funny to note that Tony Gonzalez was traded 3 times in his RASL career. He was traded, and then was traded to Joel, or Joel got him in the initial auction draft, traded him to Penton. Penton traded him to Kyle, and then Kyle in his last season traded Tony Gonzalez to, I believe, Ben.
I had it.
Traded to you. Yeah, it was either you or Ben for the last season.
Maybe Ben. It sounds like Ben.
Yeah. Now, Joel traded Tony Gonzalez, I think the first season. No, but anyway, it just being traded for scraps and continuing on strong is pretty interesting. I know Wes Welker was someone that got a little bit of little bit of push for being an initial Hall of Famer. I know for me, I don't think he met first ballot consideration. That's why he didn't show up for me. And then Randy Moss and Michael Vick, obviously, are two of the best all-time wide receiver, or second best all-time wide receiver, and the third best quarterback of all time seasons. Obviously, weren't enough to get them in. I don't really think any tough omissions. I think Mojo is someone who's maybe a little bit on the fringe. I don't know. How good do you think Mojo was?
I mean, he was always like third or fourth best. Like, I'm once again thinking about how he was drafted in other leagues and like how he performed, probably like third, fourth, fifth best running back. I mean, I know he had one season where he was number 1 or 2, I think, but otherwise, yeah, he was kind of I wouldn't say secondary guy, but
right. It's interesting when you look at his numbers. He actually had some pretty impressive seasons. Which, I mean, he finished as his second team All RASL twice, 2009, 2011. And he was running back 2. It went 3 years from 9 to 2011, where he was running back 3, running back 10, running back 2. So like you said, outside of that, just too many injuries. So that was the initial class. Like I said, all unanimous, no surprises there. Then we moved on to 2020. The new additions to the ballot were Tony Romo, Darren McFadden, Eddie Lacy, Reggie Wayne, and Dallas Clark. These are all players that retired in 2017.
And did Eddie Lacy really retire?
Yeah, he just decided to eat. He decided to spend more time eating.
I'm envisioning him like White Goodman sitting at a desk.
Hey, everybody wants to give Eddie Lacy a hard time, but here's the thing: he was Rookie of the Year in 2013.
Yeah,
2013 he was running back 7. In 2014 he was running back 6, and then even in 2015, not great, but he was running back 25. And then obviously he completely fell off the cliff after that. But so yes, he did make it. Now all of those players dropped off the ballot; they did not remain. Tony Romo did receive a special accommodation to stay on to the ballot. Wes Welker and Randy Moss, again, stayed on the ballot, did not make enough, did not make it to the 70% threshold, but remained on the ballot. Tony Romo stayed there as well. Maurice Jones-Drew fell off, did not receive as much support as he did the previous year. And then that left Arian Foster as a unanimous RASL Hall of Famer for 2020, along with Roddy White and Andre Johnson, both met the 70% criteria to get in. So another 3-person class in 2020, Arian Foster, Roddy White, and Andre Johnson. We've talked about Andre Johnson and Arian Foster already as kind of their overall dominance. But I wanted to ask you if you thought Roddy White, overall, if you thought he was underrated, considering
yeah, I think so, because if you look at his early years, and even probably pre-RASL, he was very, very consistent and put up big numbers that were actually close to Julio Jones if you looked at side by side. Like, I don't have him in front of me, but I remember I've done this before with someone and said, like, he was actually pretty solid pre-RASL. So
yeah, I mean, he was wide receiver 11, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 9 for the first 3 years of RASL, and then actually really popped, in 2010 moving on. That's kind of when that happened. He was wide receiver 1 in 2010, and then ended up finishing wide receiver 6 and 11. So he had a pretty impressive run where he just kind of ripped through and put up some serious numbers. It was a 6 or 7 year period where he was taking care of that before kind of falling off a little bit later. He had 7 consecutive seasons where he was wide receiver 10 or better. So starting from the beginning of it. So I do think that's the case. I mean, if you had to put a percentage, Carp, in terms of our trade with Marcus Colston, who I think ended up working out really, really well for you, and Roddy White, like what percentage would you put that as far as the winner for that?
Just comparing those two, I would say you won that, I don't know, 75-25.
I'm going to go like 65-35.
I mean, the only thing Colston really did for me was had a huge game in the playoffs against Joel, and I beat Joel. Like, that was about it.
Right.
I was going to mention, however, the pick swap was where I made possibly my worst wide receiver draft choice in John Baldwin, who had 2 career touchdowns and was out of the league in 3 years.
I don't think that pick swap worked for either one. I didn't even bother adding the pick swap in because I think we both.
Who did you take? Like Greg Little?
Yeah, I took Greg Little. So
you probably won that too.
I mean, I was like, I'm not even going to bother bringing that up. Yeah, because I had picked.
I'm going to look at that now.
It was pick 6 and pick 15, and I think with 15 is how I ended up with. I ended up with Greg Little at pick 15.
You had a 1 year career or 1 year longer career. And he did have 6 more touchdowns.
Hey, there you go. I guess that's something. I mean, I never really could have ever played him, but what do you think about, and we talked about this obviously in the 2000s, or the 2000s. Yeah, the 2000s. What did you think for the all-decade team? Tony Romo. I mean, as far as how he slots, we talked about how he was like clearly like the 4th best quarterback for that decade or 5th. But as far as how he stacks up to everybody else.
No, I think he's got to be close. He's probably a fringe guy of like routinely getting like 5 or 6 votes, but I just don't know how much he's going to move the needle for everyone. He could make it someday. I see it.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting because I think for the RASL Hall of Fame, he's getting like enough to kind of stay in the fringe. But it's funny because you think about it in terms of, I think, where quarterbacks are finishing for our league. And everybody's kind of high up there. And I know like Romo's numbers are better than most, but I just think that grouping there, he was always such a clear like second tier below those bigger names at the top. And knowing that all those guys are coming into their career, still playing, still doing well after he's been out for a while, I think that probably hurts him. I think the way that actual NFL games played out, what its legacy was there, constantly losing, I think also hurt him. So, next question is, what is the most embarrassing date you've ever gone on?
I don't know if it's embarrassing, but I'm pretty sure everyone's heard it. The total dick move date, or at the 3rd date when she asked to split the bill after I had paid for the first 2 dates, and then when walking to the car said splitting the bill was a total dick move. You can take me home.
Yeah.
That's probably the entertaining one.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I mean, you told me that plenty of times, and still every time you tell me, I'm just like, I keep imagining what that situation is actually like.
Also, slightly entertaining when I was still using Match, probably like 2 or 3 years ago. Like, the girl must have amnesia because she messaged me again. Like,
well, maybe she talked to someone. Maybe she talked to someone and realized that like that's just was you. Just having a symbiotic relationship and want to be 50-50, going Dutch. Maybe she's all about that Dutch life now.
Sorry, she lived in a apartment building that has, for sure, her unit was like $2,000 a month. So
yeah,
glad having to pay $30 was real.
That's why she wanted you to pay for dinner, because she's house poor. She has no money for dinner. She just goes on dates to get food so she can pay for her apartment.
That was definitely
All right. Well, then the
how am I going to get breakfast today?
The last one to really get the flames kicking up here, so you can really start to cook after this, is: would you rather listen to Simple Plan on loop for a week straight, or lose the Journeyman Genie to Ryan? Now, it's on loop everywhere you go. You have headphones on. It's just Simple Plan.
Dad, look at me.
Yup. I'd do anything. I don't know. Joel can pipe in here and sing us the whole discography.
Okay, does it actually, if it's, I have to listen to just Simple Plan sing their own
It's
songs?
just Simple Plan.
Or
it's
okay,
Simple Plan.
Because if it was Joel, if it was Joel singing Simple Plan for a week,
ooh, does that
then
change
it's a
the
real
calculus?
tough call. It might be.
Wait, is it Joel when he's been drinking though? When he's had a lot of Coors and he doesn't remember all the lyrics? So it's
yes,
just like
Joel.
And then
Joel, after 14 Coors Lights, or was it 17 that he drank during the Packers Super Bowl?
I just like when he forgets
when
he forgets the lyrics and starts humming in the middle of the song and then like picks it up right before the chorus again. That's my favorite part. So what do you take it? Are you going Simple Plan? Literally,
maybe I would rather hear that though, because maybe I would rather hear that though, because it would be entertaining because I'd be laughing at.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, if Joel's doing it, then you're laughing as opposed to just being like, I want to bang my head on a wall. So we're going back to just simply the discography of Simple Plan. The whole time you have to be awake the whole day on loop for a week straight, or you lose the journeyman genie to Ryan and you deal with that.
I'm keeping this.
I'd say so. You can deal with that pain for a week, but you don't want to have to deal with Ryan being on your case for a year. He's going to find a way to do that.
Looking at the way the current Maple Grove roster is constructed, I got a good feeling I'm going to be hanging onto this trophy for a couple more years.
The flames have really been stoked. So you ready to take it away? Yeah. Why don't you take it away and cook a little bit here? Just let them cook. It's your unfiltered, uninterrupted. Just go with it. Just feel your flow right now.
There's really nothing I want to cook on though, man. I'm in a good mood lately. So.
Okay. Wow. All right. Okay. So we're gonna.
Yeah.
You're gonna. Okay. You're turning the.
If they could take that Kit Kat commercial off the air, then I'd be happy.
Okay. So we're turning the range off. We're just gonna have a bowl of cereal instead, and. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, go cooking dinner in the microwave. Don't need the stovetop.
Okay, we can transition into the recommendation and instead. How about your? We're gonna cut this to top 3 Twin Cities beers.
Oh, I made an honorable mention list
to the GMs. There you go.
No, I gotta go 5 though. I mean, well.
All right. No, go ahead.
This
is 5.
This is based on my taste, which is IPAs. So 5, Todd the Axeman. 4, Steel Toe Sticker Fight. 3, Barrel Theory Fan the Flames. 2, Fair State Mirror Universe. Number 1, Barrel Theory Double Dry Hop Raindrops with Citra and Mosaic.
Nice.
I think I gave you a growler of that, and I bought one for Al too. So 2 have experienced it besides me. Al loves it. So
yeah, it would be great. It would be great if like COVID just stopped being a thing, so I could actually at some point, not too far down the road, get back to Minneapolis and then just fill my entire car with beer on the drive back.
Yeah.
Since it's gone.
Well, I can start shipping you stuff too.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out some sort of trade sequence. I can go and get to some of the ones around here, but there's other half all over the place now. So.
Yeah, we even get that in the Twin Cities now. It's like 2 varieties of it, but.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm like. Well, I mean, I was gonna say I'm like a mile from their brewery, which I am, but I mean, it takes me like 45 minutes to get there. Actually, it really doesn't. I got into Times Square, and it took me like when we went near the Rockefeller Center to look at the tree. It took us like 6 minutes to get there. It was crazy.
Nice.
So I don't expect that to be the case when like COVID's not happening, people are driving again. But
yeah.
Anyway,
people are actually going to offices.
That's true. Well, we had a little bit of a marathon here, Carp. So thanks for joining, GM Jon the Carp Fischer, St. Louis Park Centaurs.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you having on. We'll have to do it again. We'll figure out something another time to get on here, another topic. Maybe that time you'll have some ingredients and be ready to cook. I'm sure you could just burn, if nothing else, just try to burn some Hatterburgers.
I mean, I already cooked like 5 pounds of jambalaya yesterday, so I got that to eat for a while.
Jambalaya.
Yes.
That's all I can think of.
Spicy.
All right. Well, that'll wrap it up for us here on episode 3 of RASLcast, the Trophy Grace Project. Thanks again, and we will see you next for episode 4.